games. I play them, I make podcasts for them, and I spend too much of my money on them. In our holy year 2025, there's not really a limit on what games can be played by who. Obviously, there's the age debate where we always have to have what is appropriate for kids versus adults, vice versa. But historically, games weren't always meant for certain demographics, specifically gendered ones. You can honestly see this anywhere, from television to movies to music, a lot of the media we just ingested growing up as a whole. Amanda Cody's Gaming Sexism describes such notions that the introduction to technology in general is often a male pursuit, and when a woman is introduced to the medium, it's often under the circumstances that involves a man, which I can even attest to, as my first games were whatever was on my older brother's Wii and Nintendo DS. I couldn't even touch his PlayStation 3 or PSP. All I remember was Assassin's Creed and Fat Princess. That's a real game, by the way. And then when I complained enough to get my own consoles, what did I get? A rose gold DS Lite with Disney and Barbie games, and a Leapfrog Leapster. Granted, I was like 5 years old, but the intention was still there. And me pursuing video games wasn't considered ladylike, according to my mother. But that still warrants the question, are there genres of games built for solely females in mind? Like, seriously, Google this right now and type games for boys. Results will show games ranging from FPS, racing, action, and generally name brand games we all know and love. But then type in games for girls, and what pops up? A mass wall of pink makeover games, knockoff Disney games, and whatever this one is. Shira Chess's Ready Player 2, Women Gamers and Design Identity addresses this phenomenon, as certain developers notice that females are attracted to specific game genres. Namely, your time management games, casual puzzles, invest and express games, social games, and your fashion games. The fascination with these genres create a designed identity, a shadow gamer if you will, a pre-existing assumption of a player and how they respond and interact with games, using that assumption to create logically popular titles that are both successful in numbers and engagement. These assumptions, though, have obviously changed. I don't think I know a single woman in my life that genuinely plays these. If they do, it's because they're too far invested, and deleting data would be deleting years off of their life. There's also the nuances like, I want to play something, but I don't want to lug my bulky Steam Deck around everywhere, which is very understandable coming from a Steam Deck owner. So, where do these people turn to? The App Store, logically, where a lot of these games are made, and yet the differences in girl games and boy games still persist. Again, there's nothing stopping you as a woman from engaging in mobile Minecraft, and there's nothing wrong as a man in playing in cake, dessert, DIY food games. We all have our preferences. But there's one type of game that is noticeably left out that I feel is extremely popular for women, especially on mobile, that somewhat flies under the radar, for probably good specific reasons. Romance games, notably Otome games. Wait, come back. Why am I mentioning this? Because a certain game notably grossed over $830 million in its first year alone, during certain months beating out juggernauts like Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact, in one region alone! So now that we know this, let's discuss how and why romance games are successful and why they can be important to female spaces in general today. So I would like to emphasize this by saying this video will mainly be looking at Love in Deepspace, the sci-fi Otome game that recently came out as of last year, if that's considered recent. And I'm looking at it as kind of a case study of sorts for this video. Love in Deepspace, from what I've seen, has been the most mainstream popular Otome game in recent years. It's the second game developed like this under Paper Games, with Mr. Love Queen's Choice being its first. I played both, by the way, and I don't remember needing to fight for your life in order to progress through the game in the first one, so, big changes. No way, shape, or form is it representative of all Otome or romance games, by the way. It's just easier to do it like this because, fun fact, this is for a college final! In the case this goes anywhere outside of my little academic bubble, by the way, please let it be known I am a fan. I'm here for the lore and Mephisto the silly crow, and my favorite is Xavier. Please don't hurt me. I've never had to make this warning in my video making career in my life. I just feel like it is important to do this now. Okay, but first, what is an otome game really? It's described as a niche category of Japanese-styled games targeted towards women. The actual kanji for otome contains the character for woman and the entire term itself meaning maiden or pure girl. It boils down to befriending or romancing attractive characters and is more often than not a self-insert type of game. Some games have pre-existing main characters in mind, but it's normally played from the first person anyways. In Sarah Cristina Gazon's Growing the Otome Game Market, Fan Labor, and Otome Game Communities Online, it is described more as a category of a game versus a genre. The playstyle and the visual novel aspect can be transferable from one to another, but the genre itself can differ from fantasy to sci-fi to straight up obscure. I wouldn't say it's an unpopular type of game. Renowned is probably a better word for it. In both Chess and Gonzon's pieces, they touch on the idea of emotional labor is what makes these games work. The act of managing feelings and certain expressions, pointing out how differences in social situation, gender, or race can vary the degrees in which individuals are socialized into performing emotional labor. Basically, utilizing the player's emotional status to inform choices and influence story decisions. Winning, quote-unquote, in an otome game might have players start feeling empathetic to a character and thus making decisions leading up to the eventual romanticization of said character. I wrote romanization in the script, hold on. I will not deny you and say parasocialness has no connection to the success of these games. In fact, I completely believe that there is a parasocial edge to every romance game that gets players hooked. This can be better termed as, quote, ludo consent. As framed by Tina Howard in her PhD thesis, it explains how through the acts of self-identification with player-insert characters, agency of in-game actions and outcomes is shared between both the player and the player's character. Ludo consent is enabled by the player continuing to play and make these decisions and give off the impression that their choices matter. The player becomes an honorary author. Not only is their input required to progress, but these inputs have meaningful outcomes and consequences. The results and consequences experienced within the game, although predetermined through programming, are only possible for the player to experience if they have chosen to continue playing the game. The first otome game to hit the Western market can be traced back to Yojimbo, better known as The Bodyguards, in a 2006 PC localization. But it was the 2012 localized Hakuoki, Demon of the Fleeting Blossom for the PSP that really cemented itself as one of the first best-selling English titles. This was before microtransactions were really implemented. So how do these games become super popular? One easy explanation is fandom spaces. Fans are instrumental to these games' success, considering many of the developers behind these games are considered indie and don't have as much reach as bigger companies. Places like social media, and specifically made blog forums, are created with like-minded players in mind. People who want to share their love for a game but have no one around to talk to or share their specific anecdotes. This is where Love and Deepspace comes in, because I have been deeply ingrained into this game's fandom space since July of last year. As someone who is again just here for the actual story and has found out the hard way that this game size is too big for my phone, fandom spaces are essential for players like me to stay up to date with the game, share general interests, and most importantly, see content that is normally barred off by microtransactions. This is an aspect of otome games I, as well as many others, have quickly come to hate, and that is hiding desirable content behind paywalls and gacha systems. This is especially bad for games like Love and Deepspace that work on a card system. Cards that enable additional story content and more gameplay, and in some cases, expands on lore to an indistinguishable extent. These normally work on limited and standard banner cycles, and it's even worse if you are only playing for one of the 5 love interests and have no interest in the other male leads. By the way, that's soon to be 6. By the way, good luck to everyone on the When Tides Echo rerun happens. Dreams really do come true. This goes straight into the financial success of Otome Games because, dear lord, from its January release to June of last year, it earned around $25 to $30 million per month. But then from July to basically now, March of 2025, it averages to about $40 to $50 million per month, with its peak being $61 million in December. I had to double check and see what was happening back in December, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. A part of me believes that the drastic growth success comes from introducing new love interest. Silas notably in July, which sparked an entire wave of people, especially on TikTok, to play, with this infamous sound originating from the game and making its rounds.
Are you up for a joyride later?
Where do you want to take me?
Guess.
This doesn't even account for outside revenue being generated. The game's primary markets are China, the US, and Japan, notably China having the biggest player base at 10 million downloads worldwide. The love that these players have for these characters is insane, by the way, because apparently gone are the days where we make simple, sappy love edits or really cool velocity edits to our favorite characters. Because why don't we just rent entire billboards in public spaces for thousands of dollars? But really, why spend so much time, energy, and money on these fictional characters and games? I hate to say it because I'm gonna sound super biased, but it's most likely because of writing and how the characters are created. According to the sub-press conference with Paper Games' CEO, around 70% of their staff is female, and the entire creative department, including his wife, who's the creative director, is also female. This speaks volumes because in general, there aren't even that many non-male individuals in the industry. According to this 2024 State of the Game Industry report from GDC, 2/3 of the game development industry is predominantly men, with the majority being overtly white. Additionally, according to this article by Robin Johnson, Toward Greater Production Diversity, Examining Social Boundaries at a Video Game Studio, men are more likely than women to claim a gamer identity because most mainstream video games are created by men and marketed to men. In a medium that already disregards females from the start as a viable audience, women having prominent roles in the game development world can lead to games tailored to the needs of women and expanding the industry as a whole. And not to mention that Love and Deepspace is far from the only game developed by a very heavily women-dominated team. There are plenty of otome games and romance games on the market in the West right now that are created and developed by femme-identifying or women-based teams. In fact, again, the entire otome genre was built on the interest for women by women. It just necessarily wouldn't feel right if a man made, like, imagine this if a man made, like, Mystic Messenger or something, which, by the way, Cheretsu is a female, primarily female development team. So again, that imagine a man had to sit down and write down the entire like storyline for these guys. Like that for me is, for someone who played the game, actually crazy. It really does go to show what the kind of love and care that goes behind development of Love and Deepspace, considering the CEO himself said that it's not the women that don't like to play games, but there are no good games for women to play in general. And additionally, as a man, he doesn't understand women at all, which honestly, valid. There's also the addition of the optional period tracker that I have to acknowledge. The fact that it's even a feature in the first place is crazy to me, because this game is familiarizing audiences with the fact menstrual cycles are real and not something to be disgusted by. In this translated interview, the Paper Games team did discuss how the concept of periods could be considered a, quote, taboo topic of discussion in some places in the world, but they emphasized menstruation is not a shameful topic and encourage people to just understand and face it properly. And just from a personal standpoint, these characters feel oddly humanizing. Sure, they're attractive on the surface and have attributes other players may like more than others, but they also have depth. From their anecdotes to their voice packages, they feel real and, may I say, definitely written by a woman. The graphics and voice acting only do it more justice, and the key visuals, which I will not show, by the way, as some of them to not traumatize my professor. Hello, he's watching, hi! Finding out this is motion capture, by the way, is the funniest thing all year, and I hope these actors get a raise. Anyway, this game alone is creating safe spaces for women in a field that has shunned them away from the start. I know there has been discussions online about how, quote, inappropriate or wildly sexual this game is, and I will admit Infold loves pushing that 12+ age rating on the App Store. Please raise it, by the way. Jesus Christ. But this game and many other romance titles have done more to create a sense of parasocial security for players than most, especially in the West where conservative values about women are on the rise once again. Having these little safe havens is key. As a woman in the space myself, Otome games were something I've never viewed as a gate-kept category. Realistically, anyone can play it in my opinion, but of course I know there's issues with just solely women representation in characters when you also have to account for those who don't necessarily identify as such, like non-binary folk or those who simply want more diverse romance options than just men. Again, very understandable. Otome games are extremely interesting and I wish I had more time because some of these games deserve their own deep dives, but I'll just have to leave it at that. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I know this is kind of different, but honestly, who cares? This is my channel. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go see if I can re-download Love and Deepspace on my iPad. Bye-bye!